Right then, hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. It's time for the Armist Inquisition yet again, episode 293 on Sunday the 20th of August 2022. I'm Phil.
I'm Matt.
And tonight we're very happy to be joined by artist and author Bob Osborne. How are you doing, Bob? Are you reading this?
I feel I'm very well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I should say right at the top before I forget, thanks to Mark Antony Wyatt from the Cuckoo Town podcast for making this connection and helping this happen. So thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I've done a couple of chats with Mark, and because he's very interested in the subject, because he, of course, is also done quite a lot of research on what's gone down in Zennor and this part of Cornwall. So yeah, thanks to him.
Yeah, he's written a couple of books on Cornwall, some of the more sort of esoteric and mystical and sort of paranormal aspects. So you a good pair. Your sort of stuff ties in together, I guess, doesn't it?
They're troublemakers.
So
I think he's coming over. In the spring because I've got this big gaff here where the commune was in the First World War on the farm, and I've said that he can come and stay, and we can go around and film some local, interview some local witches and lunatics and artists and things like that. So I'm hoping he's going to come over in the spring, and we can combine our collective talents.
Yeah, and swap notes. Wonderful. Well, you very kindly sent me your book, Zennor, Spirit of Place. I think I had a little blow up here somewhere. Oh, here it is, incoming. There's a book.
Oh, that's
there.
great.
Oh, lovely.
Well done.
Come in. Yeah, I'm learning, Bob. I'm getting used to this technical stuff. Yeah, I like the book. It was modern history is not really my thing, and so I learnt quite a lot. And I like the way you sort of vividly described these characters, these weirdos, and I came away feeling like I got to know them a little bit. These people who I'd never really done any research into. So, I mean, what was the inspiration for writing the book?
Well, I suppose the most obvious thing is that where I live now and where I've lived for the last 4 years is the actual farm in a tiny hamlet called Tregurthen, which is just on the outskirts of an ancient village called Zennor, where in 1916 D.H. Lawrence came down with his German wife, Frieda von Richthofen, and an assortment of various occultists, musicians, other writers, and formed a commune here. So I've been researching Lawrence for quite some time because I did a degree in literature. I'm also a poet, and an author and an artist as well. So I combine visual arts with literary arts. But what really piqued my interest was that my three areas of research are art and literature, specifically, to do with Cornwall, because I've a long-standing relationship with St Ives, espionage, because I've got some links to, let's say, intelligence agencies, and the occult. So I've always been fascinated by occultism.
You're not a spook, Bob, are you?
No, I'm not one of the bad guys.
That is a heady mix of interests and background.
Let's just say that I've been dodging them all my life. I could go into that if you want, my childhood. But the third reason was, with the occultism, mainly it's because I'm a Romany gypsy. So I've always been interested in the paranormal and the surreal as well. So added to the fact that I'm psychic, and so I've gone onto this. I've gone into this with other various podcasts who are interested in remote viewing and that kind of stuff. So the way that I access information and the way that I make connections between the web of intrigue and the kind of assortment of all these characters that are all in a weird way connected to each other is what obsessed me over this last winter. And actually being here, it really focused my mind, because as you know, the book is called Zennor, Spirit of Place, and it was this exact spirit of place that that really got me to have a fuller understanding of how the landscape has affected these artists, these writers, these occultists. And there's a very particular spirit down here, which can be either good or bad. So that's the reason I wrote this book. And as I was writing this book, I was mainly focused on D.H. Lawrence, and the commune that he had here for those 2 years, the 16 months here in this village, was absolutely pandemonium, the trouble they caused and everything. But there was a documentary filmmaker called Diana Taylor, who works in Newlyn, who spent 30 years working for the BBC on kind of official documentaries, and she was doing a little bit of a project on Aleister Crowley. So I've always been interested in Aleister Crowley as well. So when I found out about Lawrence's cohorts and the extended group of occultists that he was hanging out with, Crowley came very much into the picture. So she said, let's make a little film about the book and about Zennor and about the Spirit of Place. So what we did, I had like 6 months to wrap this up. So we made a little documentary on a handheld camera with no budget. And that gave me the purpose and the incentive to finish the book, because I've got reams and reams. I mean, I'm at my kitchen table at the moment, and 3 or 4 months ago, this place was covered with papers and charts and spiders' webs and things like that I formed to join all these people up. So it really focused my mind on getting this project finished. So the book and the film both came out about 2 months ago. And that's where we are now, with Zennor Spirit of Place being in book form and also being in the documentary, which, by the way, it's just gone 8 o'clock. And because I've just done 2 days of shooting in Devizes, I was asked to go to Hastings, where apparently the film had won Best Documentary in the South Coast Film Festival.
Wow.
So I was going to be given an award or a trophy by the mayor, but I'm talking to you, Phil, from Preston, and you were always my first choice. So I've sent not a body double or a clone, but I've sent somebody else I know in Hastings to go up and accept this award from the mayor.
Oh, that's a power move, that, isn't it? That's such a power move. It's like Marlon Brando famously did it at the Oscars, didn't he?
I know.
He sent.
I know.
He sent. Was it an Native American lady?
Yeah, and she did a speech, didn't she? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't have an American lady, but also, I mean, this has been a crazy week. Apart from talking to you, of course, which is one of the highlights. But we also won an award in Berlin, at the Berlin International Film Festival. And the thing I like about these little film festivals, especially European ones, because they're very supportive of documentary films that are shot on no budget, that are kind of slightly different. And both the book and the film are very different. So the last week has just been pandemonium, and I came back from Devizes this afternoon because I've done 2 days of shooting with Miles Johnson, an investigative journalist based in Devizes. He runs the Basis Project, which is kind of a bit similar to Project Camelot, if you know what that is. So it's very much fresh in my mind. And, I thought the work would all be done when I published the book. I published an edition of 666 because I thought, it might not capture people's imagination, because it's quite a kind of weird subject. And the film is only a 60-minute film, but since then it's bedlam. I mean, we've had 21 showings at the Newlyn Film House. We were only going to have one initially because they were going to say, well, let's see how it goes, and if there's any interest, we'll show it again. So we've been at the Newlyn Film House for the last 3 months, and along with the other Hollywood films, including Barbie. we were talking of satanic occultism. Anyway, Barbie, Oppenheimer, that one with bloody Harrison Ford.
Indiana Jones.
And there was some other dreadful one as well. So we're in the cinema, which is actually a proper cinema, with like red velvet seats, spotlights down there. And the first time they said, "We'll show your film," I thought, great. And it sold out within 5 minutes, because when we made the film, there was no actors or anything. Everyone that was in the film, my electrician played D.H. Lawrence. And I said to him, "I need to film you walking around." He was an extra in Poldark as well. So he said, "Well, who am I playing?" I said, D.H. Lawrence. He said, "Who's that?" I said, "Don't worry, you're perfect." So a guy that I drink with in the Tinner's Arms in Zennor, which Mark from Cuckoo knows very well, I wanted somebody who looked like Aleister Crowley. So he's kind of stout. And I said, "I'll buy you a couple of pints, come up on the moors. We can talk about the haunted cottage and all the stuff that went on up there, and walk around, and we'll just film you." So he said, "Who's Aleister Crowley?" And I thought, well, those are the two actors in it. The two main characters were Lawrence and Crowley. And of course, these are two of the kind of real icons of 20th century counterculture. And they're just played by friends of mine. And we had Chris Jagger here, who was staying anyway. So he was singing in the garden. So we just filmed him singing a song for the soundtrack. So it was all really ad hoc. And, to think that it's on with all these other Hollywood films, it's just amazing, because they all had posters up outside this film house. So I said, let's get a poster done. So we've got a big poster with saying the Zennor Spirit of Place, starring D.H. Lawrence, Virginia Woolf, Aleister Crowley, a few other people. And we were selling out so regularly because people were so interested in it that they actually, rather than stopping us after one or two screenings, which they did to support a local film, they've carried on, and there's screenings now still going on. And they took off Indiana Jones, and we were in the big cinema. And when Barbie was released, we were selling out. So we still had the big cinema, which has 80 seats. Barbie started off in the small cinema. And then Oppenheimer came in as well. And so we're still going strong. And to think that, this little documentary is outselling all those Hollywood films, it just fills my heart with joy.
Wow.
So,
is there any plans for a digital release?
Well, to be honest, I'm a bit concerned about that, because, well, I won't go into why, but I'm not going to have a digital release. We could have made it onto a CD or DVD. It's going to some film festivals. It's going to Portobello. It's going to Pinewood. It's going to Stockholm and all these places, Paris. And it's still being shown in other venues locally. But I'm a bit concerned about it going out into the mainstream for kind of legal reasons, really, in the sense that it was done on no budget, and we might have done stuff that, we won't want to be liable for anything. But certainly the next film, we're going to take more care in terms of nicking stuff off various sources without permission. Let's just say that.
Right. Okay. Got you.
Because I'm a collagist and I'm a pirate, and I've also run into a bit of trouble in the book. And there's a lot of people that want this book banned, which is highly ironic because, as you know, Lady Chatterley's lover was banned, and that wasn't written here, but it was written after Lawrence left Cornwall. And of course, the minute you ban something, you create an immediate demand. So I'm kind of half pleased that a lot of people want it banned. But then again, all my previous projects have led to, a lot of controversy with what I did with Saatchi Gallery and things like that. So, at the moment, it's gone really well, and I'm surprised by its success. Delighted by it. So yeah, that's how I'm now sitting at this kitchen table. With the book finished, the film finished, and I'm hoping to wrap the whole project up in April, in October, not April, no, October, because I only published a limited edition of the book, and I like the book selling out. So when that sold out, they would become quite rare. And I've been asked about a paperback, but I'm kind of not quite sure whether to go to paperback yet, because I think once I've done a project, I like to move on to the next one.
Right. Where do people get it from? Do they have to get it from your website?
Well, I've got yes, I do have a website, and my website is my art brand. Effectively, there's several ways of getting it. You can just Google Rebel Not Taken. Now, that's my art brand, and that's also a very interesting story because that relates to when we tried to overthrow the monarchy in 1685. That's my ancestors. And we were branded Rebel Not Taken by Judge Jeffreys. So all my books I publish myself under the Rebel Not Taken label because I don't want the printers to get into trouble. So I have a kind of website which is attached. The only really social medium I use is Instagram. That's quite useful. And I'm Rebel Not Taken on Instagram. And there's a link on my Instagram page to Rebel Not Taken. That's RebelNotTaken.co.uk shop. So the three books that I last published are all on there. The Zennor book is going to go out of stock probably in another 3 weeks. I've got some gigs to do with literary festivals and stuff in with galleries in St Ives. I had 666, which amused me. It didn't amuse a lot of other people. But we're now into like 530. So that's 2 months. So there's about 100 left. And that's going to go soon.
Hopefully, yeah. I kind of want to leave the book and talk about your psychic abilities because you kind of glossed over that. I'm
happy to talk about that. That's ironically, it's fresh in my mind because that's what I've been talking about for the last 2 days.
You knew I was going to say that, didn't you, Bob?
Yeah.
When did you first discover that maybe you had something or a gift that other people don't?
I've always known it. My grandmother, I've had a very weird, complicated family history. My father was one of 18 Romany gypsies, 17 boys, 1 girl.
Wow.
My father's mother was Nelly. She was a Romany. She spoke Romany. And my father were English gypsies. So going back to 1685, my ancestor Alexander Osborne was a mercenary in the Duke of Monmouth's army that was going to try and overthrow the monarchy. So all through those last 6 or 7 generations, they've all been, none of them can read or write, by the way. My father can't read or write. I'm the first person in my male genealogical line to be able to read or write, which is why I have a bit of an obsession about, the sanctity of language and the written word. And I always wanted to be a writer because my father was a rag and bone man. In fact, I don't know if your viewers will probably remember Steptoe and Son, but we had stables in Latimer Road. Yeah, you dirty old man. So my granddad was kind of one of the people that Steptoe was based on. We had stables and then horses and carts. We were called Totters. And we had a monkey called Wanker, and so they're very dysfunctional.
Sorry, you had a monkey called Wanker?
Yeah, this is in another. There's another book where all this information is, and that's called Constructions, and that's about my ancestry and about my early work. One of my uncles was Popeye, the sailor man, he was called, and he was in the Navy, and of course then in the 60s when I grew up in that part of London. There was no restrictions. We had horses and carts, we had vans. You could bring a monkey off a ship, so we had a monkey, and we had it on our flat, and it was called Wanker because all it would do was run around the wall and perform that sexual act. So we called it Wanker. This is a true story. We used to take it down the pub. My dad spent all his life in the pub. He was an alcoholic, and they all were. Well, probably not alcoholics in those days, but that was just the best place to be. And we would dress it up, put a little blazer on it, and give it a bottle of Mackerson and sit it in the corner. And my dad's family all being gypsies. They were all incredible con men. So everyone would come in and say, "Can we buy the monkey a drink?" So we say, "Well, he's got one at the moment. Put it behind the bar." So it was another way of getting free drink. We also had a parrot called Fuck Off, and so when I was a kid, when I was 11, I had these. They were like my family, like my brothers, because I used to play with a monkey, and then the parrot, I trained it to say "fuck off," and parrots are incredible because when you're teaching them language, you can see them you see their lips move. And so the first time it said "fuck off" to someone, I have to be careful because I've got a little bit of Tourette's as well, because my natural language is a cross between Cockney rhyming slang and swearing. So because I grew up with rag and bone men and criminals, none of them who could read or write had any education. Every other word was pretty much, all the words that I now love and have used in my art and had been banned from exhibitions for using them. So I'm a little bit careful about this. But I realized I was psychic because my grandmother was a psychic, and she, although she did all the tea leaves and all that kind of thing, and my uncles used to go around selling lavender and at Epsom Derby and stuff like that, all the usual tricks. I know that my grandmother was an actual psychic because she said to me, "You're an angel," because I was blonde and all my father and all his brothers, all my other cousins were dark and very swarthy. And although I'm swarthy, I had blonde hair. And she said, "You're not like them. You're an angel. I'm going to give you the gift." And she had the gift of second sight. So, but the deal was, as long as I've never used it for bad purposes, I have the gift of second sight. And how this helped me or hindered me to a certain extent was because when I went to a primary school, because I'd had a lot of past life regression, and because of I was always seeing ghosts and things like that, and I then, when I say second sight, I've moved around in with time travel and stuff like that, and that's how I can do analytic thinking and analytic work as an artist and a writer.
What's analytic? What's analytic mean, Bob?
It's a form of information gathering which was developed in me naturally, but also then developed with my work and my relationship with a poet called Robert Graves, who some people might know about. I'll come on to that. I'll just say that when I went to a school, when I was 7, I could play chess. My dad couldn't. No one in my family played chess. There's no way that no one taught me, and I could go into play a chess game with adults and beat them when I was 7 or 8. And my dad used to make money out of me playing chess against people. And I can only put that down to, I've done past life regression and done all those things. I've dabbled with everything. And clearly in a previous life, I had played chess. So the school I went to, which was a pretty rough school on the White City estate, they were testing me all the time for psychic ability. And it came to the attention of LCC Council because every year I would get introduced to the mayor and get given a prize, normally some book about how we were running Africa. And then when I was 11, I got the complete works of Shakespeare, which subsequently I found out was a bit of a joke because Shakespeare didn't actually write any of those. Yeah. But that's another story. But already I knew that that the narrative we were being told was an absolute load of old cobblers. But what happened is that I got to the attention of there was various projects being run after the Second World War. It all started with mass observation, and this is what I've been talking about for the last 2 days with Miles Johnson, because they interview people who are either UFO abductees or whistleblowers or super soldiers, that kind of thing. So it came to the attention that I had these gifts, and so I got offered a place in a kind of special school, which was a bit like a Freemasonry school run on military lines. And when I went to this school, I was in a kind of traumatic situation because I was partly living with my mother, who was only, a child when she had me, and living with my grandparents, her parents. And then also I was living with my father, who was part of a criminal family, and with his father, who was bare knuckle boxer. So, suddenly I've pitched up at this military school, and in order to get this scholarship, my mother wanted to get me into the scholarship, so I didn't follow the life of crime that all my other cousins had gone into with drugs and stuff like that. So we had to go to this interview to this board and tell them that my father was an antique dealer and he was away on business. So they got us into this school, and I got the award for it. One poor boy from the borough always gets into this school, but then I realised that part of the reason is that they were doing all these tests on me And then I was put into not this program, but I was being kind of edged towards military way of thinking, because they would fast track people into the intelligence services and things like that. So it's a long story, but the test they did on me confirmed my psychic ability, and this is something that I've used quite a lot all through my life, to get myself into strange situations. And I was tested quite a lot, and when I got expelled from that school after quite a lot of ritual abuse, they found out that my father was a gypsy, and that they said I got in under false pretenses. So when I was dabbling 15, 16 in the early 60s, with a few drugs and things like that, I went to the Isle of Wight, took LSD, became a hippie. And then I went back to school, and they said, come back in the morning with a short back and sides, or don't come back at all. So I decided to jump ship and get out of it, because we'd had a lot of systematic beatings and things like that. And the only saving grace was that most of the education was to do with, the war, which I've been, forever interested in both wars, which were occult wars. Also, physical education. So, we were forced to run around Wormwood Scrubs, which is the most desolate place on earth, probably apart from Siberia, in just shorts and a t-shirt and plimsolls. And so, I'd be like coming second last every week, because the boy who came last would get beaten with a cane on a bare bottom or by the hand. And our gym teacher, who was administering these beatings, was subsequently nicked for being a nonce, the same old story with all these schools. And so I left, and then I really panicked, because I worked on a building site. And this was when I first realized that I had these abilities, because I went into a slightly traumatic state, in the sense that I'd signed up for night school to do my A-levels in English literature and politics, just to placate my mother's anxiety about me not getting an education. So about a week before the exam, I'd realized that I hadn't never gone to a single class or lecture or read any of the books. So I got myself into this this psychic state that I was able to do, had done beforehand, where I accessed or remote viewed or channeled all the exam questions. And then I just spent a week working out the answers to these questions. And of course, when the actual exam came, all the exam questions came up, and I got all A grades. And so I went into what's called automatic writing. And when I do some interviews, or when I write books, I go what's called the analectic method, where if you've got certain gifts, you can move forward back in time. And it's a poetic method of remote viewing that it was used by someone called Robert Graves, who I subsequently went to work with and very influenced by, where you can access past information and bring it up almost like a medium brings it up. So I've worked with mediums and sciences and that kind of thing. So it's just a way of channeling lost information without going through the boring bit about learning it all. So when I write these books, often a lot of the information comes to me, and that's how I'm able to make all these leaps and work out these networks, these elaborate networks of deception and military intelligence and things like that. So that's very much that in a nutshell. But I then didn't go. I was fast tracked to go to Oxford or Cambridge, and they said you need to go to Oxford and Cambridge because you did all your A levels, you got all A grades, and there's clearly something wrong with you, or right with you. But I didn't want to go back into the matrix, so I've avoided it all my life. And I actually ran back to my headmaster, who used to beat me, and said, "Can I see your grades?" And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because I've got all A's, and I don't think any of the other cretins at the school have got anything near that." And he said, "Oh, you'll end up like your dad in the Wormwood Scrubs, get out my office." And that's one of the things where I'm always encountering authority that I know that has no sovereignty or dominion over me, and that is all completely flawed. And so I've always actually despised authority, and always had a problem with anyone's rules. So I pretty much lived my life on that basis, doing exactly what I like. But then when I started doing more deeper research into DNA and things like that, I've realised, and I've gone into that a bit in the Zennor book about the spirit of place and the DNA that comes out of landscape, and Lawrence was very much interested in that. In the DNA doesn't degrade for 15 generations. So when I look at my ancestor from 7 generations ago, Alexander Osborne, who was took part in the rebellion and was escaped and hunted down by Judge Jeffreys, and then went into hiding for 2 years, and then was pardoned, and then all through the subsequent. My great-grandfather, my grandfather's bare-knuckle boxer, he went to the Somme, and he said those are the best years in his life because he was a complete psychopath. And then my father, who can't read or write, but it was a great con man, and they went through fortunes and then lost it all gambling and everything like that. And plus, they were running prostitutes as well. And there's also other link-ups with a great train robbery. And Christie was a friend, John Christie, who was at 10 Millington Place, was a friend of my family. So there was a lot of kind of weird links with people. And so, I've never actually got involved in criminal activity. Probably the only member of my family that hasn't, but I've always been aware of how the world works, and I wanted to beat the system from within. So, I've been a successful artist. I've published several books, and now I'm a documentary filmmaker. And one of the things about being psychic is that because I believe that I've only ever used it for good, and any money I make out of projects I give to the artists or give to other people, and that my grandmother always said to me, you'll always be lucky, so don't worry. And this was kind of put into my brain as a kind of programming by her, in a very good sense. And the other programming that people have tried to put me into, like the Freemasons or military intelligence, has always been, you're completely useless, we're going to break you down. And that's the narrative that the establishment or the matrix or the deep state, whatever you want to call it, the cabal, the Illuminati, all these entities that are running the show, very much so in this country as well. They put in the negative energy into you. So I've always held on to my psychic gypsy energy. Gypsies all believe we're God's people anyway. So, most of them are very, very lucky. And so the mantra that I use is be lucky. And every time I sign a book, I write be lucky on it. It's probably one of the few things I haven't got tattooed on me. Actually, it's got a lot of other stuff. And it's really weird because even when I did the Zennor book, and I went into a cult, and a lot of people were saying, don't go into a cult or witchcraft or black magic because, it doesn't go down well here. It doesn't actually. I mean, a lot of people are really pissed off that I've exposed what I've exposed. But even, doing 666 edition, people said that's unlucky, but I dance with the devil, and I believe I'm lucky. So when I say to people, I've got this little spell or little formula, that I can write in your book if you like, and it's be lucky. And they say, well, what does that mean? I said, well, it just means that do you want me to write be lucky, or do you not want me to write be lucky? And 100% they say, oh, write it. Because the thing about gypsies is there's also a psychological contract that if you don't write be lucky, they might think when something bad happens to them that you didn't write be lucky. So it's just little things like that that are kind of significant.
Have you done any research into the history or the lineages of Romany gypsies? Because, I mean, it's not something I know much about, but we did mention it last week because we did a show about the tarot last week, and we mentioned that one of the earliest sort of known usages of the tarot went back, to, I think it was the 15th century, something like that, with Romany gypsies.
Yes, absolutely have. Yeah, I mean, the tarot is also very pertinent to my current project because, Romany gypsies. I mean, there's a lots of the trouble is with people who have a travelling culture, an oral culture, is that it's very difficult to track them down. And certainly, when I was doing a lot of genealogical research, you do come up against a bit of a brick wall because. Even so, they were still living outside society. But there's talk about India, Egypt. But for me, it's far more kind of weird than that because I don't speak Romany, but my ancestors do, and they can go anywhere in the world, and there'd be gypsies, and they can communicate with each other. So clearly, it's a global phenomenon that isn't. Now, tarot is very interesting because I've gone deeply in this book into Rosicrucianism, Knights Templars, occult secret societies. A lot of these secret societies inform what's going on now with the United Nations, with WEF, which basically are Luciferian organizations, following an occult black magic. All the secret services employ black magic. Even the BBC employs black magic, with the flicker rate on their TV and the brainwashing programs that they put you into. So the tarot, Aleister Crowley, one of the main protagonists in my research recently, both in the book and the film, had his own tarot deck, and that was called the Thoth deck. And Thoth was an Egyptian deity that means truth. And so there's lots of different tarot decks, and lots of secret societies have their own tarot decks with their own symbology. So the devil can mean something on one tarot deck and completely different on another. And of course, if it's upside down, it's a very arcane form of passing on traditional esoteric knowledge. Because the thing about gypsies, and to a certain extent, a bit like Jews as well, in the sense that they believe in having portable wealth. So if you've got gifts, also why gypsies like having gold rings and gold sovereigns and stuff like that. And of course, the Jews, similarly, you pass on gifts through language and things like that when you're evicted from countries. And tarot reading became one of those things that like my granny who would read tea leaves, and media. I've got family members who are mediums as well, who conduct seances, and you can go somewhere, and if you've got these mysterious gifts, you can always kind of monetize them, without sounding mercenary. And there's a lot of charlatans, and of course there are some people who are genuine, but a lot of gypsies would be let's say, some of my fathers would be using these psychological weapons to instill fear in people or to put curses on people. And there's witches down here that I got asked in a literary festival in Penzance the other day if there's still any witches in Zennor. And I said, yeah, they're all my ex-girlfriends. So, I've had wives and girlfriends who have either been in MI5, MI6, witches. And then I realized that the crossover between occultism and witchcraft and espionage is just phenomenal. So in the book, I've gone into a lot why secret societies and governments and states employ occultists, employ magicians. Like Queen Elizabeth I had John Dee, who then employed his medium was Edward Kelly, who, John Dee was supposedly using it for good, and they had their own form of Enochian magic, which came from the fallen angels. And but unfortunately, he's Irish. The guy that really had the talent was Edward Kelly, who could access archons, and he used to dig up dead bodies. He was a necromancer. So, there's always this thing between light and dark. And when you've got these gifts, Kelly was using it he was digging up graveyards and having sex with the corpses, a bit like in an early day Jimmy Savile, really, and others, I won't name, among the royal family. So I've gone off track a bit here, but yeah, the links between espionage and magic, and also how that feeds into art and writing and poetry, which I'm also a published poet, has always been a bit of an obsession with me. So I move between these three worlds, and I like to make links between them. So when I'm looking at someone like D.H. Lawrence or even Virginia Woolf, which has a very kind of traditional literary narrative where people have written all these books about them, and so I'm looking at different aspects of their life, and it was looking into Lawrence's interest in the occult, in sex ritual, sex magic as well, which is another thing I've researched quite a lot and engaged in, and the fact that Lawrence was doing these rituals up on the moors here, on my farm. He got involved with the local farmer, and that was another big scandal because we go into all kinds of areas which I'll go into, but it's the links between espionage, magic in the terms of occultism, and art that really form the basis of all my work and research in whatever medium, because I move around between making sculptures, painting. I do automatic writing and poetry. And I did the whole Cash is King 2-year show at the Saatchi Gallery, where I just got artists to deface banknotes. So normally the projects get me in a lot of trouble, but I always seem to get out of it because I've got this sense that I'm always lucky. So, and I think I am really. I mean, I'm here talking to you, so
Well, going back to Lawrence, now this D.H. Lawrence, not to be confused with Lawrence of Arabia, it's a different, but they were contemporaneous.
I love Lawrence of Arabia. I know all about him as well, but that's a whole different. T. Lawrence was very much part of this crowd. He was part of the crowd. Now, it's funny you should say T. Lawrence because that's just another bit of synchronicity. But T. Lawrence was of course in MI intelligence agencies, let's put it that way. But then he also was a double agent for the Arabs. Yeah. So he got sold out by MI, the equivalent then of MI5, and actually got assassinated because he joined up trying to stop the scam that the British were running on the Arabs. So he was accepted by all a lot of the Arab secret societies, and the Arab secret societies were very much connected to going back to the Knights Templars because they had their own form of secret knowledge. And Baphomet worship is very much something that came back from the Freemasons and the Illuminati, who did do deals with each other's secret societies. And T. Lawrence was also very good friends with Robert Graves at university in the First World War, and it was Robert Graves who wrote Goodbye to All That and the Greek myths, who taught me and channeled me into doing analytic thought, which means that you can go into a subject and then download the information like a mind file and have all that information. So if I have to do a question and answer, or someone asks me a question, or I get an exam question that I haven't done any research for, if I can get into that altered state, I can access all this information, then I can just write it out. And I've written books and poems like that where I haven't had a clue what I'm writing or where I got the information from. And this is what I talk about, the analytic method, which is quite unusual. And of course, it's it's difficult to tell people that you're time traveling or that you're dredging up information that is hidden from the public. And a lot of the artists like Lawrence and Graves, they followed this process.
Wow.
And T. Lawrence as well. See, T. Lawrence would engage. I don't want to get too graphic here, but one of the things about a lot of these esoteric artists is that, like Crowley, for example, there's a thing called sex magic, which is I've done about a lot of work on that as well. And T. Lawrence was, up to practices in Arabia that a lot of the English aristocracy are very, happy to engage in, which I won't go too far down that road. But there's a certain illumination or awakening to do with Kundalini and the rising serpent that high-level Masons and high-level occultists and magicians, and also people like Crowley, can channel information to altered states. So there's lots of different ways that you can channel information or do the method of getting stuff that I do. One of them is by poetic intuition. Other ones are by altered states, i.e. hallucinogenic drugs. And other ones are through sexual rituals and sexual practices, tantric sex and things like this. So Huxley, Lawrence, Crowley, a lot of people I've researched, they're either moving between all these different methods of creating, and they've got a lot of hidden knowledge about all of this, which is not necessarily always shared with what they would term to be the the plebs or the sheep, the cattle, the epsilons that Huxley would talk about. We're looking at elitist mindsets that have always accessed this information, and I think when you move in that world and in and out of that world, you realise that there's a two-tier caste system that has always existed, certainly in this country. The class system is just doesn't even touch it, but not saying that Northerners are controlled by Southerners, but the thing that the level of elitism in this country that goes back to Victorian times is just literally off the scale.
Yeah, the traditional class system that the two Ronnies famously did a sketch on is kind of a charade, really. It's just to keep us bickering amongst ourselves.
Well, you're spot on there. I mean, that's all agendas like we won't go too much into modern politics and like that, but all these agendas are constructed by the Fabians and by the occultists, and things like racism, feminism, all the like climate change, absolutely load of bollocks, all that. So there's always a Hegelian dialectic which has been presented to the herd, that things like Trotskyism, Marxism it's all run by the Fabians. So communism is controlled by capitalism. So they'll manufacture the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the First World War, Second World War. Now they want to manufacture the Third World War. So they keep the masses entertained with even on a mundane level, like, do you support Liverpool and Everton? I mean, I'm a big football fan, so
bread and circuses.
Exactly. Yeah, you know what it's all about. We don't need to go down that road, but they're constantly putting these agendas in your face in order to stop the masses of the people that have been dumbed down so much they don't realise that if they could only get together and like take these people out, these few thousand or few tens of thousands of people that are running these agendas, the tribe would be empowered, but they disempower the tribe by dumbing them down and by keeping them in a constant state of fear and division, so that they always set people against each other. So now they've got Slavs fighting Slavs in where, and now they've got Africans fighting Africans in
that's the next theatre.
Brothers. I mean, I don't even want to go down that road, but what's going on in Africa is very exciting as well, because I get the feeling that that great country that's been those great people have been literally enslaved and now waking up, and the French are going to be they'll be doing their usual retreat act when Wagner get hold of them, but we won't go into that.
Yeah, it's I've had that impression. Well, let's probably not get into Russia. Well, because you see, we're fed a certain narrative in this country. We think that the entire world is against that evil bear over in Moscow, where it's only the Anglosphere and Western Europe. Every other country in the world is either with him or neutral. But let's get off that, because
yeah, I know.
Politics is a dangerous game.
I could say a lot about stuff like that, but I tend to avoid modern politics because
it's a shit show.
I've been cancelled so many times. That's where I talk about or write about the past, because when you understand the past, you understand where we are now.
Exactly.
So by looking at the Fabians, and by looking at the likes of Huxley, Darwin, H.G. Wells, all these people, you can understand about the New World Order, because this has been in preparation since Victorian times and way beyond that. So that's why I find it very instructive to talk, to write and talk about the history. But I think people can read between the lines as well.
Just going off those figures you mentioned there, you mentioned Huxley, Darwin, you've got Darwin's bulldog as well. What about eugenics? Where does eugenics come in all this?
Oh, God. I've just spent 2 days going all about that. Yeah. I mean,
I didn't know that.
How long have you got? I mean, I'm sure I could keep your viewers up all night with this. I mean, the Eugenics Society, wow. That impacts on me as well, because when I went to school, I had to take maybe you're too young, but the 11 plus, and the IQ tests. Well, the IQ tests and the 11 plus was all run by the British Eugenics Society. It was all administered by LSE. LSE is a part of British Military Intelligence.
That's London School of Economics, is it?
Yeah, it's London School of Economics, and that's where the whole lots of these agendas are set up. Trotskyism, Marxism, feminism, transgender movement. So the British eugenics is a construct of various people, like about Darwin and T.H. Huxley. I think you just mentioned Huxley. Well, Huxley's grandfather was T.H. Huxley, and he was called Darwin's bulldog. So a lot of other families, like the Darwins, and the Huxleys and the Wedgwoods, and to a certain extent, other families like Rothschilds and the fake Saxe-Coburgs, who are not a royal family anyway, but they have actually, they're in breeding programs, so that when Darwin's Charles Darwin, another big con man he is, when his wife died, he married his mother's sister, and the Darwins and the Huxleys all tend to marry into marriage, so they'll all be cousins, and they have an elite belief that their bloodline is pure, because they trace it back. They're obsessed with bloodlines, the eugenics, the elites. I mean, they're obsessed with bloodlines that go back to Nephilim and tribe of Dan, and a lot of them come from these families that can actually trace their bloodlines back. So when they do this research into supposed cancer cures, effectively, because they interbreed so much and have so many cretins, the cures are just really for themselves to promote their longevity. So a lot of these people do, live a very long time. And of course, the Nazis had a lot of technology, that cloning and artificial intelligence, which we're moving into. So the Eugenic Society was born from Victorian Fabianism, and people like H.G. Wells. I think you had some interest in H.G. Wells yourself, didn't you? Because
George Bernard Shaw was a big player as well, wasn't
he? Yeah, they all were. And the thing about them, they were all high-level Freemasons. And I've tracked down a lot of these. The Freemasonry lodges, they were in the occult. So when they're Freemasons, they're pretty much at a certain level. They're also occultists. So, H.G. Wells, his biology teacher was T.H. Huxley. And of course, Aldous Huxley was a massively important figure in the counterculture. So when they set out all these agendas, I mean, they've always been obsessed with depopulation, and that now we're moving into a stage where the slave culture is probably becoming a bit redundant, because traditionally, with Victorian, coal mines, they needed people to dig out stuff and do menial jobs. So
we keep hearing the news about how many jobs are going to get replaced by AI. Us useless eaters are not going to be around much longer.
Useless eaters is a term that obviously Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates. Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates are just the descendants of these this Fabian philosophies that was set up by the Fabians, the Tavistock Institute. And Huxley's. I'm not going to go too much into obvious things, but yeah, all I'm saying is that all of these people were high-level Freemasons. They all indulged in nefarious sex practices. The links between kiddie fiddling and a lot of these people are kind of there, and there's a massive cover-up. The cover-up still goes on, of course, with I've got links to Ghislaine Maxwell, and I know all about that. I'm not going to go into any of those areas, but when you see these people, they're all the parties they were having down here. There was all these country houses, and they were hobnobbing with the German equivalents. They would go over to Bavaria, get rent boys over there, and then they'd come over here. So the English aristocracy have always been pretty much webbed up with the Nazi ideology, and Fabianism, to a certain extent, is it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. So they're the Jesuits of socialism, and so they present this kind of what people think is a liberal, helping people, like the whole woke agenda. None of this helps people. It's just driving them towards transhumanism. And with Fabian, I'm not going to go too much into that, but about H.G. Wells and the Time Machine, and he wrote the War of the Worlds. That was just pre-scripted programming for the alien technology that is now being introduced. And I'm not also going to go into aliens, but I know all about it, and I know that there are deals being done off planet. And the thing I just did for 2 days, I mean, that's very much part of that UFO world, where there's deals being done.
Just before I forget, you just mentioned about the Fabian Society being a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I got an email today with an article, and this is the famous Fabian window designed by George Bernard Shaw. And if you see the shield above the earth that's been pounded with hammers, on the crest of the shield is a wolf in sheep's clothing. How poetic.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, there we are. That's just more synchronicity. But
yeah, it was weird.
I mean, the other thing about the Fabians is that we won't go too much into the esoteric aspects of it, but a lot of them have belief systems that go back to that link to Luciferianism. Now, the United Nations is based on complete Luciferian principles. So I won't go into the Lucis Trust now. If you want to do another one at some stage, I can go into that.
Yes, definitely. Let's do more, Bob.
The satanic practice, but basically Fabianism is very much linked to the Luciferian, and the whole New Age agenda is a fake Luciferian agenda. And effectively the Fabians run counterculture, and they've certainly run counterculture in this country. I've done a lot of work on all the movements that they put in, and then of course with people like Crowley and Huxley, and to a certain extent Lawrence, although he was unwittingly used, in these agendas. They went to California and set up the counterculture there, and Huxley was instrumental in establishing the CIA. And the Fabians, have always been a very sinister organisation. So, to cut to the quick, the two agendas that we are now involved in after the counterculture agenda are now the trans gender, which relates to Baphomet worship, which also goes back to the Freemasons and the Knights Templars, and a lot of the stuff in. People really need to have another look at Revelations and Genesis, because I'm not saying that the Bible is true in any sense, but even if it's another part of prescriptive programming, we're now in end times, and Mark of the Beast, etc., is pure Revelations. So the transgender agenda they're now speeding it up, because time is getting short for them, because the actual agenda was 2020, Agenda 21. We knew what happened then, which we're not going to talk about, and then 2030 they're rushing us towards the transgender. So effectively what the Fabians realized is that their belief system is not what we think it is. It's not about enhancing their lives through liberalism or through all these good causes. It's about achieving oneness. Their concept of oneness is global government, one world currency again. So we're now in the transgender stage. This is why they're pushing it so much. And this was all established around at the time of the First World War. These agendas that were laid out. Also Albert Pike, people need to look at him with Freemasonry. And the next stage is of course the transhumanism, and that's going to be fully implemented by 2050. So part of their religious belief system, again, I'm not going to go too much into the religious aspects, I can at another time, is that by worshipping Lucifer, who was the fallen angel, and also the Age of Aquarius is another fake construct that was partly created by Aleister Crowley, and that links to the Aeon of Horus and like the Twin Towers. I can tell you all about the Twin Towers being a ritual, occult ritual. In that when we move to the transgender, they reckon that 2050 is their kind of cut off for that. And by then,
transhuman, sorry, Bob.
Transhuman, yeah, transhuman. They won't. That's why they're fusing the male and female. So they're sterile. They're emasculating men. All the toxic masculinity agendas that they're forcing down one's throats, making women, well, not even feminism, but just turning them into. They're trying to combine the sexes into one sex. So effectively, people won't need to reproduce naturally anymore, because that's another agenda that they want to create their own universe. So the scientists take over from God. So Nietzsche, all those people, it's about getting rid of God, getting rid of formal religion. So they've made all these fake religions, and then they've now demonized Christianity, Islam, etc., because they don't want the competition when you should literally trust the science. So transhumanism, they're now rushing towards it, and of course that's why we're now implants. They've been doing cranial implants and putting mind files into people for at least 100 years. And of course, the Germans developed all this technology. The Nazis developed a lot of this technology, which is why we took over. The war never ended.
Those guys moved over. Operation Paperclip. They just moved to America.
Operation Paperclip was pretty much an extension of the Fabian deals that were done at the end of the Second World War. And Operation Paperclip, the MK Ultra, Mengele was involved with he's kind of early version of Fauci, really. And of course, Werner von Braun ran NASA, was just a variation of the Nazi rocket technology that they'd established, because they had such superiority that they were doing experiments on super soldiers, and really weird stuff in Nazi Germany to do with occultism and things like that. And I think the English were very impressed with that, and so they absorbed them into the West.
We're back to Indiana Jones again, aren't we? The Nazis looking for the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah,
This is all prescriptive programming.
It's in plain sight.
Yeah.
They have to do it in plain sight because of their Luciferian belief system, is that they have to tell you what they're doing to you, and they have to get your consent.
Yes, revelation
so you
of
have
the
to
method.
Comply. Exactly, and of course that's, revelation of the method again is Freemasonic term, so it's about jumping the abyss and things like that. So that they're really so warped that they almost get a psychotic pleasure out as well about telling the victims what they're going to do to them. So we're now in a state of where humanity is the victim and the state is the psychopath, literally. So transhumanism, they're going to speed up that agenda now, and so you're going to hear a lot of stuff about test tube. They've already, of course, done Dolly the sheep and all that, and we've been making clones probably for the last 100 years. There are clones walking among us.
Look at Biden.
I know it's well. I'm not going to go into Biden's not Biden. Let's put it that way. I mean, I've got a connection with the Orange Man to Donald Trump because I knew his first one, and I'm not going to go into the 2020 election, but other than say that it was hugely significant, and that Trump has got a body double who plays golf. That's not the same Donald Trump that they've been trying to kill for the last 4 or 5 years, and they probably have got him somehow and cloned him or controlled him with stuff. But anyway, it's going on, and it's been going on for a long time. And all these, I noticed at the opening clips here, you got a film from the Carpenter film where the guy puts on the glasses and he sees aliens. And the trouble is, all the Five Eyes countries, and who I'm talking about there, like Australia, New Zealand, which are just Canada, USA, and UK. That's the original empire, and that is effectively is the New World Order, and they're all in place now. The people they want to be in place are in place, including the unelected Rat, Sunak, Macron. Justin Castro, aka Justin Trudeau, whose father was Fidel Castro, of course, which everyone knows, and of course, the clone Biden, the dementia patient, that is mind controlled. So there's no leadership in any of this. There's no political solution to any of this because the opposition are also equally compromised. So it's only you get rare people like Andrew Bridgman, they might come out and say something, or but then you look at Sunak, not Sunak, Starmer. Who protected Jimmy Savile. And the alternative is even worse. So there's no left, right wing. That's another Hegelian dialectic to think that you can vote one out and vote the other in. So, I suppose there is a little bit of hope that if Trump comes back in, the wars will cease because he doesn't want to go down that path of total destruction, nor does Putin Z. So what's happening now with BRICS currencies, we're seeing the controlled demolition of the West, which is another agenda because America is Babylon in Egyptian black magic thinking. Of course, the people that make all these decisions, do all these deals, are still working out various agendas that go back 2,000 or 3,000 years.
Who's the whore of Babylon then? Is that Hillary Clinton?
Well, again, it goes back to Crowley. I mean, all Crowley's wives and girlfriends he called Scarlet Women, and Crowley did what's called Babylon Working. So the Babylon Working, which is a sex ritual he did in 1943, was then adopted by Jack Parsons and Ron Hubbard. That laid the path to Scientology and things like that. So effectively, Crowley's way of thinking was that now we're entering the age of Eon of Horus. And also, the research I've done, it's pretty good evidence that that Barbara Bush was Aleister Crowley's daughter, and it's a bit ironic that when the Bush family, also part of the ancient Nazi, not just Nazi, but Illuminati Freemasonry cabal, that then got control of America. And notice when the Twin Towers went down, which was a ritual. That was a ritual to welcome in the Eon of Horus, which is the Eon of Destruction. And the Twin Towers was a ritual constructed by Crowley, with his formula 1 + 1 = 2 = ground zero. So when the Twin Towers fell, you notice that there's still clips of Bush Bush Jr. in a classroom full of kids with an upside down book, satanic symbol, reading a story about goats. Well, goat worship links back to Baphomet worship, and Aleister Crowley was one of his names, apart from the Great Beast, and 666 was Baphomet. So unfortunately, there's a lot of black magic going on at the moment, and basically people are trapped in it. They don't really know. They can't read the symbols. They can't read the signs. And the West, the bank crashes come in, the run on the banks. That's all part of the fall of Babylon. America was set up in 1776 by the Freemasonries. Hence, New York is from the Yorkites, and the Illuminati infiltrated the Freemasons in 1776, which was the War of Independence. So America effectively is a fake avatar for Babylon, and Babylon has got to fall, and Babylon is in the verge of falling now. So people like the people that are running the show there, clearly running the suicide controlled demolition of the West. We're seeing it in plain sight. So they don't really care about the devastation that they're caused by opening all their borders and flooding it with fentanyl and stuff like that. And of course they got no military to speak of, because they've all been given the monkey shot or wearing pink, wearing rainbows. So no wonder the Chinese and the Russians are licking their lips and thinking, yeah, come on, bring it. So the only answer they got is nuclear, because they couldn't even, their Abraham. Well, I'm not going to go into that. I've completely lost the plot now.
No, it's all right. We've
if there's anything you want to kind of just ask.
So I'm just going to say we've gone over an hour.
We've
gone over an hour already. I could listen to you all night, Bob. We've gone all over the shop. But I suppose to finish, is there any hope for us, for us humans? Because you've laid out a lot of the issues that are in front of us. I mean, what can we do as individuals, as people who don't want to see these things happen? Can we do anything?
Oh, God.
No.
I'm trying to think. I know we're all laughing, but I think there's a lot of things you can do. But massive non-compliance, but I actually can't see that happening in this country, because unfortunately, as much as I love English humour and I love a lot of things about this country, this is the most brainwashed country on earth. Unfortunately, the British brainwashing company have done an excellent job, and the media has done an excellent job. So people here are just living in cloud cuckoo land. They have not got a clue what's going on, and even people with educations, we've seen it over the past.
They're probably the worst off if you've been formally educated.
They are the worst off because, even observing, like you get people in the street, like workers or people with no education, who won't put a mask on, and yet you get people. I mean, I'm not talking about what we're not allowed to talk about, but even just masking people is a test of compliance. And all the other tests of compliance are things like putting smart meters in, getting them to live in 15-minute cities. This is all the agenda being rolled out in real time, and they're rolled out real quickly. So the fact that people are now, and I've got great faith in the tribe. Like as you know, I'm a sports fan, and I'm not even working class. I'm sub-working class. I'm criminal class, but I love it when people go down and smash down these Big Brother cameras, and the quicker that little rat puts them up, the quicker the white van drivers go around and take them down. And even going into supermarkets and only having cash and filling up your trolleys with stuff, and then if they refuse to take cash, they want you to put your contact list on, you just leave the trolley there. So, this is all forcing the agenda back. And the more they try and roll it out, they're running out of time now. And there's a thing called Project Looking Glass. So to offer some hope, there's a CIA program which partly, the Tavistock and the British instigated, which is Project Looking Glass. And this is the thing they use where we're on several different timelines. So time is another myth. The whole thing about 24 hours a day is 7 days a week, 365 days. It's all black magic. So it's trapping you in a timeline. And the timeline we're on is one of many other timelines that we could also be on. So when you do the kind of work that I've done, I realize I can move between timelines. So the timeline that all the rats or the sheep in their pens or the cattle are all in. They just can't realise that there's other timeline options. And if you think of it almost like a game of chess, so there's these guys that have got all the pieces, they've got all the army, they've got all the heart-weather system in place, they've got the psychological warfare, they've got everything, they've got all the money, all the resources, all the bases on Mars and everything like that. And there's humanity now down under the thumb. But some of the people I've listened to or spoken to come in these programs have said the other timelines are converging. Unless they can run this timeline soon, the other timeline is going to take over, because they realize they've got to speed things up because their time is running out. And it's like a game of chess where I play chess, as I mentioned earlier, and it's like a game of chess where the better player, i.e. the let's call him the white player, is in a winning position and knows he's going to win, and the other team, not the team that is going to lose, get more and more desperate because they think they're going to lose, and so they start making increasingly panicked moves. And now we're in that state where the cabal or the deep state, we all know who they are. They're getting increasingly panicked, so they're making quicker and quicker moves, and they're trying to speed up the game. And the only way you can win in this position is to make a dramatic risk. And nuclear, of course, is one of those options. But from what I can gather, and I do believe in that the more they speed up, the more, let's say, the awakening happens. And there's a lot of talk about the Great Awakening and stuff like that, as opposed to the Great Reset. But I think it needs to happen. It needs to happen fast. And to a certain extent, everyone's got to fight their own battle in this. We all know people who are going to perish. But the nucleus, or there are a nucleus of people that will survive this. And I think that's all I can say really, is that we're all going to see quite a lot of, let's say, sustainability, another word they use. It's just like a nice way of putting depopulation. So, it's a question of survival now. And I've been in survival mode for a while now. Like I've got my cupboard behind me with 6 months full of food. I've got my gun. I live in a very remote part of the world. I don't get involved with media. I've even done things this week, like when I knew that I was being under psychic attack and possibly, other forms of attack because of various things that are going on. I went, I can, because of my background, I can access altered states, and I can affect my energies through different diets, because I've studied nutrition quite a lot. So like when I've been in a good place, I might go on a fruit diet. I've also drunk my own urine consistently. And there's another whole story there. But at the moment, I've been on a carnivore diet. So 3 weeks ago, I realized that I was having to do a lot of this work. So I've just been eating ribeye and eggs and stuff, because what they've told us about veganism, and of course, is another big con trick to weaken the population and dumb them down. Plants are all out to kill you, especially the plants that they're spraying now. So
yeah, last time I checked, I only have one stomach. I'm not a ruminant.
Yeah, well, I started eating ribeye, and I noticed my energy levels, because I needed to have high energy levels at the moment, and I had to go into what's called lion energy. I'm not saying that I like the idea of slaughtering cattle, but I know that for my survival at the moment, what's going on now, I've had to go into lion energy, which is quite an aggressive energy. So I'll go through this, but you have your own methods of surviving and adapting and learning skills that you might need to learn. And one of those skills might be just really realizing that everything we're being told is just, if you believe the opposite what we're being told by the media, you're probably on the right track, because it's all one big fake narrative. And keep your energy high, keep a sense of humour, try and eat proper food, not the rubbish they give you. And so I think on an individual level, I'm just in survival mode, and also watching what unfolds. If you can detach yourself from the horror of it all, is actually fascinating. So we do live in interesting times.
It's that old Chinese proverb, okay. May you live in interesting times. Yeah, well, we certainly are. Well, Bob, this has been absolutely fascinating. I'm sure this is going to go down a treat with our listeners and viewers. And like you said, I'd love to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we've really skirted over.
Yeah.
And if you want to do more detail about any one of those topics, I'm happy to do it if you just tell me what it is. Yeah. But we've really just done a run through the whole of the bloody century now, like every philosophy and all, everything, So I hope people don't think it's a rambling load of from a lunatic. But I've done the research. I know what I'm talking about, and I'm not saying I'm a prophet. I'm just a naughty boy, but.
Well, it's been fascinating. Stay on the line for us, Bob, while we play ourselves out. Mm-hmm. Thank you once again for joining us. The links are in the show notes.
Lucky.
Yeah, be lucky. Be lucky. And you lot out there in YouTube land, we'll be back in 10, 15 minutes for part 2. We're going to do some news. And I've dusted off an old jingle for tonight. Oh, it might give you a touch of PTSD, some flashbacks. But anyway, right. See you soon. Thanks, Bob.